Okay, so I would like to address this concept, or should I say, misconception that's been, kind of floating around in the culture and in society at large, about what a simp really is. People need to understand that a simp is not someone who takes care of his family, who takes care of his wife, who takes care of his responsibilities. That's a good man, right? A simp is someone who is not getting out what they're putting into a relationship or even a job, right? And or to the culture or to society at large. They're not getting out what they're putting in, and they keep allowing themselves to be taken advantage of. So in this video, I want to address that misconception because I see the enemy using this to deceive the people. I like to call this video the simplification of what a simp really is. You ready? Here we go. Initially, the term simp was colloquially used by the proverbial quote unquote bad boy, right? So, what a simp was they noticed, since they were not necessarily caught up in the narrative of what a good man was, right? They noticed that there were certain women, quote unquote, gold diggers, quote unquote, femme fatales, quote unquote, men eaters, right? That would take advantage of a man striving to be a good man, but primarily a nice guy who was obviously being taken advantage of, and he was still pouring into this female that was not wife material by God's standards, but because he was quote unquote simping, he was being simple and not understanding the complexity of the, let's just say, situation that he was in. So he was being, simple minded, right? He was being a simp. And true to form, a real man does not allow himself to be simple or a simp in any context, not just relationally, right? But not socially, not professionally, right? Not spiritually. We should not be simps in any way, shape, form, or fashion, right? So, okay, what a simp was traditionally is pretty much, exactly what a man is not supposed to be. And I can understand how that word originated. The problem is now, if you are someone who loves too deeply, right? Someone who believes in and what the traditional man believed in, honoring God, honoring your family, honoring your wife, honoring your social circle, right? Being an asset to society, being somebody who is about character, dignity, integrity, and honor, right? Honoring your wife as Christ loved the church, loving her as Christ loved the church, showering her with love, right, and protection, right, with blessings, be it spiritual blessings, material blessings, financial blessings, or what have you. Nowadays, this can be looked at as simping because the narrative is, if you are not the proverbial bad boy, right, then you are a simp. What I love is real women, daughters of God, are waking up in this generation to that narrative, and they're seeing that a lot of them have been simping for the bad boy, and quote unquote, and the quote unquote bad boy has been simping for the culture, which has been misled and misguided into self-sabotage, right? We live in an era where we have to understand no kingdom seeks to truly empower their people, especially those that are traditionally, you know, the impoverished, right? The dispossessed, right? So what people, we're not going to get off into that type of video, but what people in positions of power typically tend to do is to feed the marginalized, the dispossessed, the disempowered a bunch of trash, right, in order to keep us in a state of self-sabotage. And a lot of us have been simping to that narrative, although we see we're getting nothing good out of it. Nothing but sickness, death, destruction, broken homes, broken relationships, broken marriages, and all these things, right? So if you want to use the term simp, go back to its original meaning and be able to look at life with a nuanced lens. What I mean by nuanced lens is you must use deductive reasoning, not inductive reasoning. So inductive reasoning goes something like this. If I say a bird that's white, all birds are white. But deductive reasoning looks for the truth of the matter, the what's actually going on, right? Deductive reasoning will say, hey, that bird is white, but let me keep doing my research to see are all birds white, or is there a nuance in the situation where only a certain type of bird is white? And I feel like nowadays we use what's called a logical fallacy of hasty generalization, where we hear one thing, we see one thing, and then we use inductive reasoning. We apply that to all people, and thereby we can cause people that are still in mental, physical, and spiritual development, such as children and young adults, to believe that, hey, if I'm to be a real man, I must mistreat and dishonor my woman or God or my family or my social circle, right? Least I be considered a simp. And no, young people especially, if you perform for people, you are a simp. If you're not being true to yourself, true to who God created you to be, if you give in to cultural narratives, if you give in to colloquial terms that you see does not have your best interest at heart, then you are being a simp. Because you have to understand that word has been weaponized nowadays in order to try to destroy marriages, break up homes, friendships, relationships, as unfortunately a lot of weak-minded people simp to the narrative of being a simp instead of being who God ordained, called, created, and commanded us to be. That's what being a true man is about. A real man does not perform for people. He's not a trained monkey. He's not simple-minded. He's not a simp. He is everything God has created him to be and who his family needs him to be, whether people are calling him a simp or not. And he's making sure what he puts into something, come on, Holy Spirit, whether it's the home, whether it's the church, whether it's work, whether it's his social circle, that it is getting reciprocated. And if it's not, then he simply removes himself from the equation so that he won't be a simp. Even if people are calling him that, he know God, himself, and, in their hearts, they all know better. They're just saying that because it makes them feel better, right? Especially because a lot of them are simping for society, for the culture, right? For their social circles that may be toxic, okay? So young ladies, young men, old in between, what have you, don't let your significant other tell you they're giving you the worst of them simply because they're not simping. Acquire the best of them, okay? Don't be a simp.